So let's get to the program. Our speaker today is Kevin Dodson, Beckon VP of Data Strategy. Along with our CEO, Jennifer Zezit, Kevin crafts and steers the Beckon category leading point of view and go-to-market strategy. He acts as liaison between Beckon prospects and customers and Beckon business and product strategy. He also educates the market on the Beckon offering and provides pivot strategies for the business as the marketplace expands and develops. Before Beckon, Kevin co-founded the marketing and analytics practice at US Web Razorfish, where he kicked off his 15 years of experience in marketing analytics and strategy. Kevin holds a BS from West Point and an MBA in marketing ops from Wharton School of Business. Welcome, Kevin, and take it away.
Hey, thanks, Bonnie, for that kind introduction. As Bonnie said, for those of you who are just joining, my name is Kevin Dodson, and I help to run our data strategy practice here at Beckon. I've had a broad career, probably longer than I like to admit, in marketing data and marketing strategy. Anything from doing actual analysis as a practitioner of analytics, through creating marketing strategies, through creating both marketing and ad tech products. Really had a broad variety of experiences. My experience here at Beckon has been great in that I've had the ability to speak with literally hundreds of marketers, multiple hundreds of marketers, as we have developed Beckon, and as we go through the process of evangelizing Beckon and what we're doing here, all the way from channel managers to cross-channel campaign managers, the very top of the rung, the CMO, EVPs of marketing, knowledge and insights, really just a broad variety of folks within marketing discipline, as well as folks outside of the discipline, people like CIOs and CFOs who are increasingly becoming interested in marketing data. So we've learned a ton through the development of Beckon and through talking to all these folks, and we're going to share a little bit of that with you today during today's webcast. So just briefly, some of the structural stuff. We got about an hour for the webcast. I have about 35 minutes of prepared content, and then I want to keep maybe 15, 20 minutes for questions. Just looking at the attendee list here, broad variety of folks from looks like practitioners as well as executives from a broad number of industries. So I expect some really good questions at the end of the session. Got a couple of slides to talk about Beckon, just to introduce Beckon to those of you who don't know about Beckon or aren't familiar with it. It'll just help to give you some sense of where we're coming from. Then we're going to talk about the current state of affairs with marketing data. We're going to move then into understanding what we can learn from practices done by the financial management industry and how they're dealing with data, and what we can take from that and apply it to marketing. And then we're going to wrap up with just some tools we're making available to help you get your arms around your current situation. And then, of course, wrap up with questions. So Beckon we're located in the Bay Area, the heart of Silicon Valley. Our mission is to help brands understand and beautifully communicate the business impact of everything that marketing does. We're about 4 years old. We're working with a broad variety of tons of great customers. But essentially, what we're trying to do is to unify all of the data. We call it the CMO level view. So we're taking data from offline channels, from online channels, both performance data as well as spend data from things like brand equity research, could be awareness studies, could be Net Promoter Score, could be even CSAT type stuff from business outcome data, right? Things like sales or things like really any kind of outcome, downloads. All those data sources typically are in separate applications or in separate data silos. So we're reaching into these data silos, and we are pulling together particular metrics around business outcomes, marketing spend and activity, and brand outcomes, automating those flows of data into a centralized, unified marketing data platform or a data hub. We're automating the ingestion of all these data feeds. We're standardizing the metrics, the KPIs. We're making sure that all the data is cleansed on the way in, so things like formats and things like nomenclature are all the same. All the data is tagged properly by the reporting categories or the taxonomy that your particular business wants to see. Right? Examples could be, I want to make sure all my campaign names are the same across all my channels. I want to make sure my business units or my regions are all standardized. We're tagging all that data so that then we can provide to marketers super simple, easy to use, and easy to access self-serve dashboards and report cards for ongoing marketing management, marketing optimization, and performance reporting. An additional benefit, of course, to structuring all of the data is that it's now available for other analysis throughout the organization, whether it be things like advanced econometric analysis or pushing data from backend, nice clean marketing data from backend into the enterprise data warehouse, or any kind of advanced analytics that either marketing is doing, data scientists are doing, or even someone like the CFO might be interested in grabbing some of the data as well. So all of this we're doing with probably a number of great clients. You see a broad number of industries here, things from financial services to packaged goods, broadcasting, hoteling, a lot of large B2C clients, some large B2B as well. But a commonality among all these marketers is that no matter where they started out in their sophistication around marketing data, they're all committed to creating and advancing their internal capability of dealing with data. As marketers, they recognize this is a strategic thing, a strategic initiative that they want to get ahead of and to begin to use that data to create a real business advantage in their particular industry. So this is the final slide about Beckon, but I recognize that there are tons and tons of technologies out there. Everyone says they do basically the same thing. So as a consumer or buyer, there's a lot of confusion out there. I think, and I'm sure you've all seen the Lumascapes or the cheap MarTech technology maps about the companies. So when you think about Beckon, some of the ways we're approaching the problem a little bit differently is that we are built for marketers only. So we focus the problem. We're not a general BI or a general marketing or a general platform for different functions. We're focused on marketing. Really allows us to go deep and to create features and functions that marketers know, that marketers use. We have a lot of marketing DNA in the company. That just helps us to make sure that we're creating products that marketers can actually use. I mentioned this before, but we're focused on basically all types of data. We call it the CMO level view of the data. Anything the CMO might want to see. Offline, online, brand equity, business outcome, all this data, we're pulling it together, and we're automating those data flows. So initially when we spoke to folks about why they weren't using data or why the current reporting process was broken, a main piece of it was that without automating the data flows, it becomes too difficult to get the data together. So at Beckon, we're focused on assisting folks to automate those flows, not just the data itself, but the transformed data, so marketers have access then to what we're calling marketer-ready data. It doesn't need to be cleansed, doesn't need to be transformed, it's ready to go. And finally, it's easy to use. Because in addition to difficulty of getting data together, the other issue that most marketers said was it's super difficult to use the current tool sets that are available. So there are a lot of great visualization tools out there. Most all of them are focused on power users or data scientists or business analysts. You really have to be an expert in the tool to use it. Well, in order to free up this data and to create true self-serve, what we have decided to do is to really enable marketers with simple-to-use dashboarding, scorecarding, ad hoc query tools so that truly the data can be self-serve to marketing managers and marketing leaders. We're really focused on super easy-to-use query tools and reports to, again, free up this data. So that's Beckon in a nutshell. Let's get going now on the rest of the content. And I want to start by talking a little bit about some context about where marketing currently is. I think it's important for folks to understand, kind of stick your head up a little bit and say, where are we? What's going on? So this slide here talks about the technology disruption curve. I know some of you are probably familiar with it. Essentially what happens, though, is that you have technologies that come along once in a while who create explosive revolution in terms of capability. So for a long period of time, marketing for, let's say, the last century, you basically had a handful of channels, right? TV, radio, print. Telephone came along, but really not that many shocks from a technology perspective to the overall capability of marketing. But starting in about, the internet, let's say, marketing began a rapid evolution of capability. And so this really occurred, let's say, starting about 1995, let's say, if you want to put a date on it. And we're currently about halfway through this revolution, I would estimate, right? So you think about internet came along, then social, now mobile. We're moving into wearables, Internet of Things, addressable TV, ongoing. Tons and tons of technological innovation is really making marketing a very dynamic place to be. So what does that mean for marketers? It means more channels, more real-time data, just more data, period. More noise, more complexity that you as marketers need to manage, need to get your arms around. And as I mentioned, this started about 95, let's say, maybe a little bit later, plus or minus. We're in 2015. So we've been going about 20 years now in this revolution. How long is it going to last? Well, who knows? But let's say we're about halfway through this. It means we got about another, 20 years or so maybe longer. So really, practically speaking, for a good portion of all of our careers, we're going to see continued rapid evolution in the space. So I think a great example of that is this particular graphic here, which shows in a broad variety of social, commerce platforms about what's happening in terms of the amount of data, the amount of activity out there. So roughly 22,000 gigabytes of data a second is passed over the internet. And the fascinating part about this slide, I think, is that many of these companies didn't even exist for 3, 4, 5 years ago. So there's a tremendous amount of new capability. As a marketer, you're looking at this saying, wow, there are tons of new opportunities for communicating with my customers, for finding new customers, for getting my message out there. But it's also, and the downside is, it's increasingly complex, increasingly fragmented. So there's kind of a two edges of the coin here. The upside is plenty of new opportunity. The downside is, plenty of risk in trying to understand how to use all of these technologies. So what does that mean? It means it's going to be a little bit of a rough road ahead, I think, for everybody. Not necessarily a bad road, it'll be a very scenic road. But I think as I mentioned, for a long way to come, it's going to be a constant struggle with innovating new technologies and how to use these things. And the bottom line is, as a marketer, you've got to get comfortable with data. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be necessarily an analyst. Doesn't mean you need to be a data scientist. But it does mean that marketing today is going to be ever more reliant upon the use of data. And as a marketing manager, you're going to have to get comfortable with how to use marketing metrics on an ongoing basis to optimize and to report on your existing marketing activities. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Madman. Changing from Madman into mass, woman is kind of certainly what's happening right now. And so a lot of this innovation is around that. And clearly Beckon is the heart of helping companies to make that transition. Hope, somebody said hope is not a strategy. I don't think sticking your head in the sand is viable. Again, get comfortable with data, comfortable with how to use the numbers, and develop a strategy just for doing that. I'm sure some of you have seen this kind of humorous thing. I'm just going to throw it in here. Big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it. Nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it. So everyone claims they are doing it. A guy named Dan Airley, funny guy. I think the same thing can be said for marketing data generally. In all of our talks with a lot of marketers, you go to conferences, you see folks on stage. Everybody has their systems. It sounds like all buttoned up. But I really think we're kind of in the middle of the beginning of all of this. And so just rest assured that the general state of marketing analytics out there is not as advanced as you might be made to believe from some of the conferences you might go to. So let's talk about the problem a little more specifically. So you have tons and tons of marketing channels, online, offline, a bunch of different data silos, whether it be just actual spend and performance or business or brand outcomes. They're all typically coming from different applications. So again, hundreds of applications out there, some marketing specific, some more general if you're talking about, sales data. And these applications are spitting out tons and tons of different metrics. TRPs, GRPs, click-throughs, likes, pins, opens, tons and tons of stuff is coming out together from the cross-channel environment. But if you're trying to answer any questions that are outside of the channel, super difficult. So if I want to ask questions about my website, I can go to my web applications, my web analytics applications. I can do a deep dive into that. But if I want to understand how a cross-channel campaign is performing, or how anything I'm doing outside the channel is working, it's super difficult. Simple questions. How's this campaign performing? What are the tactics in this cross-channel campaign that are performing the best? How am I tracking towards my goal for this campaign? What tactics are the most cost-effective? what campaigns are working. All these managerial questions that are super difficult to ask right now because the data is super fragmented. And of course, these all support the top level questions of, is marketing driving sales and growth? And finally, where am I spending my next marketing dollar? And why is this such a difficult problem? Well, marketing data is super messy. And we're talking about here, these are all the reports that people get into their inbox. You all get into your inboxes every week. We get email stats, we get calendar views, we get agency reports, we get, social logins. This is, web data applications, social data and separate reports. We get agency data from different campaigns going on, more social data. Bottom line is a ton of data is floating out there, and it's all very difficult to get your arms around. If you're getting 10 to 20 reports every week dumped into your email inbox, as well as 10 logins and access to a broad variety of tools, super overwhelming. So what are marketers doing now? What are marketers doing to cope with this challenge? Well, the primary strategy is still cut and paste. We've seen some heroic efforts for analysts and companies creating 40, 50, 60, megabyte spreadsheets, trying to, sending them all over the world, trying to pull this stuff together. Not very scalable, very, very time consuming and not very efficient. Definitely manual process, but still I would say cut and paste into Excel is the primary method. Second, reporting was easy. So everyone does monthly or quarterly reporting. Super easy just to take the stats that are available to you that look pretty good. Hey, we've got 10,000 followers, right? What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is there's really no context. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it up? Is it down? Easier to do, right? But not providing a lot of deep insight as to what's performing. Third, outsource it to IT. So this is less of a strategy now, I think, than it was a number of years ago. IT is doing a lot of things now. IT has its own disruption going on. Almost the last thing that IT wants to deal with currently is to building a marketing analytics system. So trying to rely upon internal resources, it's just an increasingly difficult task, particularly when you think of the cost advantages that a lot of SaaS technologies like that are bringing to the table. The build versus buy decision is oftentimes a combination of speed to market as well as just overall total cost of ownership. Buying is winning out typically throughout most engagements. 4, outsource to your agency. So here we have the picture of a fox in a hen house. For a very long time, agencies have been grading themselves. I think we're seeing less of a desire for that to continue, more of a desire for marketers to take this data in-house and to do a better job of just managing agency relationships and making sure they understand actually what's going on and less relying upon the agency for grading itself. And finally, data spelunking. So for those of you familiar with spelunking, it's the art of going into caves and exploring them. Certainly a lot of data spelunking is going on. You get some question from the CMO or the executive marketer, hey, how much did we spend on this campaign, or what was our cost per impression for this campaign? How many signups or what was the conversion rate? A week later, you're still digging through data trying to put it all together. So the spelunking is, from a discovery standpoint, it can be useful, but from an overall just ongoing reporting and data management perspective, not super efficient. So these strategies are not working. I think we'd all agree with that statement. I think this was an interesting statistic that we found, the CMO Council Unified Survey last year of August. This is a question for senior marketers. What complexities or challenges are you facing relative to the use of new technologies? Number 1, integrating and centralizing increasingly fragmented data. It all kind of says that. That to me is super interesting. And second, figuring out what to select and how to integrate this data. The top issues are around data collection, data integration, and use of data. So why aren't these strategies working? Good question. Here's the iceberg. This is the iceberg challenge or the iceberg problem. So if you are a ship's captain riding around on a ship called the Titanic, let's say, all of the people on the ship looking at the nice pretty icebergs that go by, these aren't the things that are going to sink your ship, right? What's going to sink your ship is the 80% of the iceberg that is below the waterline. So it looks pretty on top, but below the waterline is what you can't see, it's what you're going to run into, it's what's going to sink you. So in our world, we're talking about marketing data, visualizations, and dashboards. These are pretty pictures. This is stuff that's above the waterline. This is the stuff you can see, stuff people focus on, and the stuff that gets passed around, stuff that's interesting. But it's the stuff below the waterline that is really going to sink any marketing data project, any marketing reporting project that you're working on. What does this mean? Messy data. We talked about the problem with data in a number of different silos, different formats, right? Different date ranges, all of just the many detailed problems that come with pulling together data from a lot of different segments. Inconsistent naming, right? Is it holiday 2015? Is it Christmas 2015? Is it Xmas 2015? A single campaign can have 10 different names and 10 different channels, even the same channel. And you have a bunch of display campaigns going on. You can have 20 different campaign names in a single channel, missing data values, no consistent taxonomy to view the data, not properly labeled, and all this happening at an increasingly higher volume, higher velocity, means the problem is just ever growing. And our experience is about 80-20, let's say. So if you're thinking about marketing data, think about the problem below the waterline. This is the problem you have to solve. Many ways of visualizing data out there, 1% of the problem. There are a lot of great tools out there, but they're all dependent upon having a good, structured, normalized, consistent way of, and a scalable way of getting that data organized from below the waterline. So how do we tackle the challenge? How do we tackle the challenge of understanding that so much of this work is below the waterline? Other parts of the organization have figured it out, right? If you think about finance, operations, sales, HR, they all have core systems in place they're using to get a handle on all of their messy data challenges. Marketing is kind of the last functional area to sort it out. We decided to look to finance for some ways that they are dealing with their data problems to see if those can be, you can port some of those insights into marketing data. So what are finance's secrets with dealing with data? Because finance has a lot of messy data as well. This is just a screenshot of a bunch of receipts. So if you think about even the receipts you create receipts and you have to submit those into finance. A lot of receipts, a lot of messy data, right? We think about, though, finance. We were laughing to say, hey, if finance was a baby, this is what it would look like, right? It's clean, it's all washed, bright-eyed. If marketing data was a baby, it would look a lot like this. We've got data everywhere. We've got data in our face. We've got data in the bowl. We've got data in our diaper, on the wall, etc. A messy problem. So how do we take our messy marketing data, turn it into a clean, a marketing baby rather, turn it into a clean finance baby? That's really a challenge. So if finance dealt with data like marketing deals with data, you would basically just grab all of your receipts, walk up to the door, jam them through the slot, and let somebody else on the other side deal with it, right? You would basically, and then finance would gather up all the receipts once a month. 3, 4, 5 of them would spend, days and nights visually copying, pasting stuff into a spreadsheet, and that would be the monthly report. Well, clearly that's not the way that finance does it. It's not scalable. It's not useful. It's not replicable. All the reasons we know that finance does not deal with their data that way, which is typically, unfortunately, as we've gone through those strategies, the way that marketing deals with their data. So let's talk about the first thing that finance does to get a hold of their data challenge, their messy data challenge. The first is that all data needs to be coming to a common system. I'm not saying it just needs to be one system, but I'm saying that all data comes together in a system of record. So there's one source of truth. There's one place everyone can go to get the actual numbers, the agreed upon metrics. Marketing, not the case, right? So anywhere from 20 to 50 different systems handling the data. Maybe a couple of them are unified. Maybe some stuff's going into a data warehouse, but nothing is happening. Nothing's coming into a common system. You think about how difficult it would be to pull together your monthly or quarterly earnings reports. You had to go to 50 different systems and pull them together. Not something that finance would do. Second, use functional specific tools. So, finance would never go to IT and say, hey, can you build me an SAP-like application in Excel? No, it's going to integrate SAP. And why is that? Well, functional specific tools have a lot of ways that make getting the data and using the data tons easier than any kind of general purpose tool that's been built and integrated. So we run into marketing a lot, which says, hey, we're going to go ahead and perhaps our IT guys are going to throw something together for us, or they're going to build us some Excel macros, or we're going to try to create a new data warehouse that has all marketing data. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you have tools like Beacon out there, which are functionally specific, built for marketing. You have a faster time to value, certainly, and you're going to be offered a lot more capability than typically you're going to be able to build in-house, and certainly a lot fewer headaches. Third, now again, for those of you who are just joining, we're going through lessons that finance has learned on how they deal with their messy data problem. And if we can pull some of these lessons into marketing, it's to help marketers get their arms around their messy data problem. The third thing here is store just the data that matters. So here's a receipt. Right, if I go out, I have some fish and chips or a crab special here, a little PBR, a little Stella, because I'm mixing my beers. Does everything need to be put into a finance system? No, just the metrics that matters. Right, we need to know where I went, maybe the date and the overall value, not all of the individual details. So it's okay to leave some of the data out of the system. Be very selective about what you're pulling into the system. So don't pull everything in. And from a marketing perspective, you don't need everything in, to one system. Just be very intentful about the metrics you are pulling in. Fourth here, clean up the mess on the way in. So when you do, let's say, your expense reports, you don't just, stick them into the slot. You have to go through a process of saying, okay, this expense is for, hotel. This expense is for air travel. This expense is for, meals, etc. So finance has realized you have to create what they would call a chart of accounts, ways to categorize this data. Marketing needs a chart of accounts. We need ways that we're describing data, that we can bucket the data so it can be useful for reporting and analytics. Things like campaigns, right? Things like you may want to apply channels, business units, regions, brands. These are all different ways of describing data that need to be agreed upon, right? This will become the marketing chart of accounts so that when you are running a particular activity, you can say, okay, this activity took place in this channel, it's part of this campaign, be part of this broader initiative, maybe has these goals associated with it, run by this business unit, run for this region, maybe run out of this sub-region, applying to this brand. All things that have to be set up previously so that you don't end up with, many, many, many different tags. So in the case of finance data, we call whatever hotel, we'll say hotel and lodging. That's a category. It's not, I submit my receipt and I say, I'm going to call it motel. Somebody else submits a receipt, I'm going to actually name the hotel, the Sheraton. Somebody else submits a receipt, I'm going to call it the Westin. So now I already have confusion. And so when I go to say, okay, how much money did I spend on hotels and lodging? Well, now I have to crawl through, 10 different definitions. So coming up with that consistent taxonomy, super critical in getting your arms around the data. Then definitions. So in addition to the taxonomy, what has finance done? Well, here we have a mind the gap, GAAP, right? Generally acceptable accounting principles. They've gone through the process of creating standard definitions so that when finance folks talk about things like EBITDA, everybody knows EBITDA means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And furthermore, they have definitions for what interest means, what taxes mean, what depreciation means, what amortization means. So they've had hundreds of years to figure these things out, but essentially everyone has agreement on what's going on. Well, in the marketing world, it's not going to happen industry-wide, but what you can do is come up with standard definitions within your own company. You're all referring to the same things, right? So you're referring to things like campaigns in the same way, right? You understand a campaign. Is it a email blast, a campaign? Is a campaign a large multi-channel global event? Is a campaign something in between? Single channel, multiple channel? Just what exactly is a campaign? Let's get some agreement on what a campaign is. Plenty of channels, campaigns, they're very simple things. Things like conversions, talking about conversions. Well, conversions can be anything from a download a white paper to a converted, on a search term, to a landing page, to finally made a sale. Well, let's define this to make sure that we're all talking about conversions the same way, so we're not mixing apples to oranges. 6, consistent KPIs and standard reporting. So this is part of the definitional issue as well, but let's agree upon the KPIs and the metrics that we're all going to use and the standard reports that we're going to use to display them so that we can be very efficient about collecting the data and very efficient about all agreeing upon what we're going to be focused on. Without any kind of consistent reporting, you end up with creating ad hoc reports. Every month you got a new view. It's not a very consistent way for everyone to be able to collaborate or communicate around the data. Here at Beckon, we've created a marketing scorecard here, which is super flexible. This particular version of it is a buyer's journey scorecard. So we have from awareness, through engagement, decisions, options, advocacy, top line or KPIs. These are important things, overall impressions, right? Net sales, and then we have a bunch of other metrics, single and kind of multiple channel metrics that we're using to support the overall goal. So whether it's a scorecard around the buyer's journey, or a scorecard comparing campaigns to each other, or a scorecard around individual campaign performance, all these things can be agreed upon. The data can flow into it, and then it's set up properly. Everyone can be judged, or everyone can be at least abreast of what's going on between campaigns, between regions, between brands, etc. 7, automate data collection. So this is the indoor plumbing problem. So you think about the metaphor of plumbing, super useful here. So if you don't have indoor plumbing, if you take a bath, what do? Well, you get the bucket, go to the river, you fill it up, you come back, fill up your bathtub, make a fire, warm the water up, take a bath. So that whole process takes a long time, so you take about 1 bath a day. Well, once you introduce indoor plumbing, what happens? Well, then you can all of a sudden not focus on getting the water, you focus on taking a bath. So now you take a number of baths a day. Well, the same thing for data. If you have to be focused on collecting the data as a major part of it, you're not going to be doing that much data analysis, that much reporting. But once you go to plumbing, which is an area that Beckon is focused on, you then have data available to you all the time. So the focus moves from getting the data to using the data. You take more baths, right? 1 bath a day. Maybe I take a bath. Maybe I invent an hour shower. Maybe I invent a dishwasher. Maybe I invent outdoor sprinkler systems. All these new things can be enabled once I have indoor running water. Well, the same thing with data. So when data is flowing, the discussion moves from how to get the data to what to do with the data to how we agree upon the data, to new and unique ways of using the data, all at the service of improving marketing and business success. 8, make it a mission-critical process. So it's amazing now. Everyone understands that marketing data is some of the most valuable data in the enterprise, and yet it's treated like a second-class citizen oftentimes. It's kind of a shallow process. So in order to really focus and use the data, you've got to make it mission-critical. Finance data is mission-critical. Finance systems are mission-critical. Marketing systems, marketing data oftentimes is not. So just recognize that if you want to have an ongoing process, the collection and use of data, you've got to focus on it, and the organization has to agree that it needs to be a mission-critical process. All right, number 9 is the last one. Didn't quite get to 10 here. But finally, use proper resources and systems. Again, cutting and pasting into Excel is not going to really help you gain scale, overall scale or efficiency in terms of collecting and using marketing data. You've got to use the proper resources, the proper systems, the proper processes, right? People, process, technologies. These things need to be dedicated resources for use of collection and use of marketing data. So, the campaign manager shouldn't be spending all of their time collecting data. They have real day jobs, but they should be trained on how to use these systems. They should be able to use the systems. That requires what? It requires the proper systems to be in place for them to be used on. So, as a review here, we're talking about how things in finance, that finance has done to get a hold of their data problem, that we can port to marketing. These 9 things. 1, put all the data into a common system. 2, use function-specific tools. 3, store just the data that matters, not everything. 4, make sure you clean up the data on the way in, normalize it, standardize it, either in make sure dates, times, formats, all the tagging is consistent against a global taxonomy, right? Create standard definitions. 5, make sure all those definitions are agreed upon, whether it's campaigns, whether it's impressions, whether it's conversions, whether it's views. 6, make sure you have consistent KPIs and reports you're using. 7, automate the collection of this data so that data collection does not become the failure point of the process. 8, commit to making a mission-critical process. And then 9, make sure you dedicate the proper resources, the people, process, technologies necessary to make this a scalable and ongoing system work. As I'm closing up here, before we get into questions, I just want to remind everybody, this really is a journey. So as I mentioned before, the shock of new technologies, we're about 20 years into this thing. We've got a ways to go. We're really starting to get our arms around the data challenge. But people typically are still fairly low in the maturity model. So we have here a simple 5-stage model, starting out with solid reporting, moving into manual integration of reporting, moving into automated integrated reporting. We then can move into more advanced analytics and planning, and finally doing a lot of predictive analytics. Most folks we talk to are still in stage 1 or 2. So if you're scratching your head now saying like, wow, this is overwhelming, there's a ton of stuff going on, where do I start? Just realize you're in good company. Everybody is really starting to figure this out, starting to understand the importance of it. Second, assists companies in moving from 2 to 3. We help to automate those data flows. We help to set these systems. We help to enable companies with a general marketing data capability to help them to continue on this marketing data journey. And finally, I'm going to end with a quote that I love from one of our customers, a guy named David Schmidt, who's the head of performance analytics for Intercontinental Hotels. Culture trumps data every time. He said this, I was talking to him at a conference, I'm like, you know what, that's exactly right. Without the culture supporting this notion of data-informed marketing, any kind of project you undertake is going to fail. So there has to be broad agreement that marketing data is going to be important to be used. There are processes out there, there are systems and technologies out there that need to be implemented. But generally, from the top down, marketing data has got to be a priority. And once that takes place, then you can have successful outcomes with implementing any kind of marketing data management system or any kind of marketing collection or reporting system. So with that, that's the end of the formal content. We do have some resources available, and then we'll go into some questions. So if you look at your screen here at the lower right, little green folder there are some assets in there that you can download. The first one is a copy of this presentation. You can have my smiling glamour shot there for all eternity. We also have something we call the data source worksheet. So this is a great tool for just a list of channels and places to find data. Sit down there, go through this. It can be very illuminating as to all of the different pockets of data, offline, online, brand outcomes, business outcomes. Super valuable exercise to do either by yourself or with your team, just to understand where the data lives, who owns it, and then there's a prioritization column there so you can understand, what are the prioritized sources of data that you're most interested in bringing together, and what data sources maybe are not so mission critical. And finally, actually not finally, but there's a marketing performance scorecard here. Again, this is the one I showed in the presentation, buyer's journey, so you can see the actual metrics that we are using both as KPIs as well as in support of each individual stage of the journey. And then finally, there is a blank scorecard that you can use yourself. Again, a good exercise just to go through and say, okay, let's put some goals up here. Let's put some campaign goals. Let's put some overall marketing goals. Let's compare campaigns. Let's do our own buyer's journey. What metrics and KPIs would we want to support that? And then let's understand a little bit about where those metrics are and how we might bring them together. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to questions. Please field your questions to Bonnie, and she will do some aggregation of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Bonnie.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. I do have a couple of questions coming in here in the Q&A widget. If you can put your questions in through the widget that's there in your event console, you can also ask them over Twitter, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. First, You got a little flurry of questions there at the end when you started describing the scorecard and the scorecard template. If you could you just tell us what is a scorecard, why is it used, when is it used, et cetera?
Sure, good question. So when we're talking about ways of setting up consistent reporting templates. So there's a couple of concepts that I think are helpful. One is to understand there are two basic ways of doing analytics. You have the bottom-up way of doing analytics, in which you're basically just kind of crawling through different data sets looking for insights. So you may have some kind of hypothesis trying to test, or you may just be looking for different correlations or different interesting things in the data. Super valuable to do, but not super efficient in terms of time. So, and there's all kinds of different ways and tools to do that. The second thing is more of a top-down view, right? So the first one was bottom-up, where you're just crawling through the data looking for stuff. The next way, which is a much more efficient way, is top-down, which is you define reports or scorecards that you're going to populate on an ongoing basis, and you're going to use those basically as key tools in understanding how you're performing. So a scorecard is a key way to do that, in so much as you're defining, either goals, or you're defining, campaigns, or you're defining, channels, or you're defining, your customer experience journey, different, funnel metrics, different stages of the funnel, and then you are very prescriptive about saying, okay, these are the 4 to 5 metrics, or this is the one key performance indicator and the 4 or 5 metrics that we're going to use on an ongoing basis to describe the success of our performance. Now, that's a much easier problem to solve from a data perspective, because you're only trying to gather, whatever, 10 to 20 different metrics and compare them together. So this top-down way of reporting on the data is super useful for keeping an ongoing cadence of understanding what's happening in your marketing, understanding how things are performing, giving you a sense of, if you are performing to goals you're setting, maybe, how you're performing, different maybe trouble spots to focus on. A very efficient, very data, scorecards are very efficient and very data-intensive ways to do that. You also have dashboards. So dashboards are a little bit more flexible. So within Beckon, you can really put anything you want to on a dashboard. It can be made up of a ton of different charts. Dashboards are better for this kind of ongoing, if a scorecard is really good, very dense way of getting a very quick snapshot of what's happening, and how you're doing against your goals, or how you're doing in your funnel. A dashboard is a little more specialized, a little more deep dive into some of the more maybe nuances of some of that analysis. So we're seeing, scorecards being, super popular feature within Beckon, because it also helps organizations to focus on exactly what we're trying to do. So getting the agreement around, okay, we're actually going to start comparing campaigns to each other, and we're going to compare them along the same metrics. We're going to compare them along, cost per impression, maybe. We're going to compare them along cost per engagement. We're going to compare them all with cost per conversion. If we can get that data, we're going to compare them along really whatever, common metric or KPI that you want to. So then you're really doing a good apples-to-apples comparison. So you can say, okay, I have all the campaigns we ran last year, let's just look at what's successful, what was not. You can then begin to establish internal benchmarks for what should we be expecting. When we run a campaign, what kind of conversion rate should we be expecting? What kind of engagement rate should we be expecting? And then when you start to run campaigns, you can take a look after a couple of days or a week against your internal benchmarks, get a sense for, hey, does this campaign need to be, optimized? Are we meeting our internal benchmarks? Are we above or below? What's the variance? If we're below, let's drill deeper into that thing and understand what's not working. So this can be a foundational piece for, tracking what's currently happening, and then as the beginning place to do a more deep dive into understanding performance.
Okay, that one actually answers the next couple of questions. There were some questions about what's the difference between a scorecard and a dashboard, so it looks like you answered that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. We've got a lot of questions around culture. So things like what's any advice on making marketing data management mission critical? Who in the organization do I need to get on board and involved? What advice do you have to give me about how to start changing my culture in order to be more embracing of our data management challenge?
No, excellent question. I think the old, the beatings will stop once morale improves is probably not the way to do it. I think it raises a great question, particularly because you have a lot of people now becoming more focused and interested in marketing data. So, I even mentioned that we do, most of our work is with marketers, but we're seeing an increasing number of people from IT and people from, the office of the CFO, all starting to get more interested in, marketing data and how to access and how to use it. So there's two, I think, ways to do it. Grassroots, right? There are a lot of very inexpensive tools out there, a lot of great tools out there. Tools obviously like Beckon that are for what they're providing, are a super good deal. And so they can be implemented at the department level, at the business unit level, and provide a ton of value, at the grassroots level. This then can percolate up as people see, hey, this tool is pretty useful. It's being used by this particular brand. It's being used by this particular business unit. Others can adopt. So it's a bottom-up strategy of adoption. Conversely, you have top-down strategies. This is where the CMO recognizes, you know what, or the CEO, this is a strategic imperative. I'm going to make this one of my key goals. I'm going to make sure that we develop, marketing capability around understanding and using marketing data throughout the entire enterprise. And then, by virtue of the CEO and the CMO setting goals, everybody else can fall into line. So depending upon where you are in the organization, if you're at the top, great, you can make it happen. If you're at the bottom, you can also make it happen, just a little bit differently. But keep in mind that this is going to be an evolving thing. So it's definitely, a crawl, walk, run type of situation when you don't need to bite off on the entire, you don't need to boil the ocean all at once. Pick a nice size business unit or brand or piece of the business that you can get your arms around. Run a POC, implement something like Beckon in place, get some quick wins. There's a very fast time to value with these tools. So success is going to breed more success in the organization. I think it's most problematic when you say, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to create a large internal project around custom creating, our own system that can drag on for a very long time. It can be very expensive. A lot of the creating frameworks, creating the data model, the architecture, all this stuff takes a ton of time, and these projects can just basically kind of die under their own weight. So, I would say go for quick hits, quick wins. If you're at the grassroots level, but recognize that this is not an easy problem. So I think it's a mistake to go into these problems saying, hey, this is super simple. And of course, all the vendors out there, everyone's saying, oh, this is so simple, blah, blah, blah. But the reality of anybody who's dealt with this thing is that, it's a complicated problem. And it's going to take, as I mentioned during the webcast, specialized tools and resources to do it. Now, that's not meant to scare you off. It's just meant to give you a realistic perspective of this is a real thing. Let's make it a real process. Let's treat it like a real project. Let's treat it like a mission-critical process. And then let's take a very sensible approach about evolving it, starting small and working big. We were just at a recent meeting yesterday with a prospect out here on the East Coast, and he said something great, which he said that, think big, start small, scale fast. And I think that's just a great little soundbite there for a strategy to make this happen. Kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope I got to some of the key pieces through it. That answer.
Okay, we're getting quite a few questions. I'm going to answer a couple of them in a couple of bulk statements here. We get lots of questions about the resources. Just a reminder that they're in the bottom of your event console. There's a green folder on the right, and that's where all the resources are available that Kevin talked about, including a copy of the deck. There have been other questions about further resources, and I'd encourage you all to go to beckon.com/resources. Lots of white papers there for you, and also beckon.com/blogs. We often call out books, other reports that we come across that are great resources for you guys. So beckon.com/resources or /blog for additional reading. And then now I'm going to transition. We're getting a lot of questions about the Beckon platform. So the first of which is, what is implementation like? What does it look like to begin implementing a data management platform like Beckon?
Again, good question. It's so easy. No. I think it's much easier, right? Because Beckon is purposely designed for marketing data. We have a lot of the problems figured out in terms of how to deal with different types of data, different applications. Clearly, you have your whole suite of marketing applications, but we've also recognized that still a majority of data coming into Beckon is from spreadsheet data or CSVs, or exports from BI tools. So it's still a lot of manual data out there. Because we're focused against it, though, we can rapidly come in. Just for implementation, it's actually not that hard when you consider doing something like custom implementation. Back in my prior life, I did a lot of SAP type implementations, and those things are just a nightmare compared to Beckon. So with Beckon, we sit down there, we get agreement on number of data sources, where they are, who owns them, how we access them. We get agreement on the overall marketing chart of accounts, right? The taxonomy. How do you want to view your marketing? Do you want to view it by business unit, by sub-business unit, by region, by brand, by sub-brand, by product category, by vertical, by pay, don't earn, all these different ways that you might want to see your data. We establish that taxonomy. We then go into data, and Beckon is committed to doing all the heavy lifting. So once we get understanding about where the data sources live, we get introductions or we get logins to some of the tools for some of the data owners. We agree upon a taxonomy. We then can go into the data. We can agree upon metrics that we're going to pull in to Beckon. And then our guys on our team, our customer success team, does all of the connecting and the transforming, creating the transformers that are necessary to create the data from its raw state into its structured state. So that all takes... Can
you expand on that one just a little bit, Kevin, because there are two deeper questions about exactly how does that integration happen, what you just were talking about. And then secondly, there's another question about, can you further explain taxonomy? So maybe you can hit both right now.
Sure. So I'll start with taxonomy first. So taxonomy is just an ordered hierarchical list. So if you have a taxonomy, it might be just an agreed upon way of describing things. So I may say, look, we're agreeing that we have 4 regions. We're going to call them Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, and Southeast. And then each one of those regions has an additional, 2 to 5 subregions. And we're going to name them, X, Y, Z. Then you have a list of, okay, this is how we're going to refer to our regions by these 4 main regions and these 20 subregions. And we're all in agreement that's what we're going to talk about. We can then take that data, and then when we are transforming it, so then we hook up all these data sources and bring in raw data. We then on our end, our customer success team creates transformers, basically, which are just codified business rules, right? So a business rule might be, okay, take this campaign, we're pulling a campaign data from Dart or from, some type of display campaign or search campaign, and we know from the data that it's being targeted at the Southeast. So we're going to pull that into Beckon, and then we're going to create a rule that says, this campaign coming from this source, label Southeast. And then that's going to flow through the system so that when then the data shows up, the dashboard, the scorecards, everything is bucketed appropriately by that particular category of Southeast. So the transformation and the application of business rules is just, some of the work that needs to be done during setup. Because Beckon is focused against this problem, and this really is the key piece of this, that we're able to do that in a cost-effective and scalable manner, so that if things do change, you change your regions, you change, obviously campaigns change all the time, so we're able to do things like, auto create campaigns, so we see new campaigns in data feed, we can now create them. We're also able to do very fast turns around by things like saying, okay, if we now know that, holiday 2015 campaign is actually named these 10 different things throughout the different channel tools. We can all basically normalize that. So the transformer will be set up to say, if it is, holiday 2015 or Xmas 2015 or, Santa Day or, ABCDFG, make all of those into holiday 2015. Great, that's a rule set. If we see a new campaign that comes along, that has a different name, our guys can, on our end, they can either create a new campaign out of that, or they can add that name to the list of things that followed our campaign, holiday 2015. So just that transformation, really, we have a very flexible way of dealing with any kinds of data and applying those rules. You can remove data that's perhaps spurious from different data sets. You can combine data. All that to get to a place when the data is nice and clean. All the formats match, right? So you would be amazed if you're doing data cleansing, just the difficulty in getting things like formats. I have 2 decimal points. I have no decimal points. I have pounds. I have dollars. I have all different ways the data is expressed. You have different just things like time periods. When do my weeks start? My weeks start on Monday. They start on Sunday. They start on Saturday. Like, all of these things have effects on terms of how the data comes in. So it's all that nuts and bolts stuff that all these transformations are set up to take care of, so the data can get then when it's in Beckon, it's all nice, organized, and you have the ability then to be very flexible in terms of the dates that you're pulling into. You know that all your weeks are aligned. You know that all your nomenclature is the same. So it makes the reporting analysis much simpler. Happy to do, in terms of get more deep, we're happy to take calls and talk to people. If you have interest in Beckon, please get a hold of our sales team. You can just email us directly, sales@beckon.com, or you can even contact Bonnie or myself directly. We'd be happy to put you in touch with the right people.
Okay, great. I'm going to wrap it up here soon, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. This is going to be the last question. And Kevin, it's, again, another collapse with several questions coming in, and that is around how does one forecast ROI for investing in a tool like Beckon, or build a business case for investing in a tool like Beckon?
Sure. So there's a couple of ways of thinking about ROI business case for Beckon. I'm actually glad you asked. It's in the process right now of actually doing an official ROI study with a third-party research firm. It should be available in 6 to 8 weeks or so to truly establish. I think we're seeing across the board, just great returns from our existing customers. But I would say there are 2 different buckets of savings you're going to find with Beckon. The first one is just cost avoidance. So everybody's currently doing reporting. You currently have anywhere from 1 to 10 people who are cutting and pasting stuff together, or you are paying your agency to do it, or you're doing a combination of all the above, or you're having 20 to 40% of your marketers spend time building reports. I saw a study from the Boston Consulting Group that said that in very complex organizations, managers spend sometimes 40% of their time creating and writing reports. Right? It wasn't specific to marketing, but I got to believe that everything I've seen in my experience as a marketer and environmental marketers is that marketers spend a ton of time chasing down data and creating reports. So again, in the first category of cost avoidance, you can look to those places to say, okay, how many people do we have doing reporting that are dedicated to reporting now? How many people do we have who are partially doing reporting kind of under the radar by your marketing managers? And are we paying agencies to do that? So that's one big bucket of money. The second way is expanding capability. This is a little hard to get your head around, but if you can just think of, if we had access to all of our campaign data, in a more of a real-time way, all organized, we would be able to do things like understand when our campaigns launch and we're below benchmarks, understand when our campaigns launched and some channels are performing well, some channels are performing poorly. So you can then take steps to either, shift money around to different channels, different tactics. You can then take steps to improve those tactics that aren't working. What kind of an increase could we get if we just did that kind of performance optimization, to our marketing? 10%, 20%? You can create models, and we have an ROI calculator at Beckon that we'd be happy to share with you to say, let's just take, 3, 4, 5%. Once you apply that to your entire marketing budget, particularly if you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, or billions of dollars, adds up pretty quickly. So that's the best. I think those 2 buckets, cost avoidance, which you're currently doing manually, right? So it's automating a manual process. And secondly, just overall increase in the ability to optimize your marketing and to do a better job planning, is certainly worth, 10 to 20%, or pick your number, 5 to 20% of your overall marketing spend. And again, we're releasing that study probably in 6 to 8 weeks. So stay tuned for that.